this is the first band I've been in where just writing has been really, really easy. So it just all kind of flew out. There wasn't any sort of sense of like, oh, we have to make this really creative or anything. It was just, we were just jamming and stuff happened. So.
Never really saw it as a burden at all. It was definitely the most creative thing I've done to this point as a musician. I think there were times when, like in anything you do as a musician, where you have doubts and you think, is this going to be everything I want it to be? All these ideas that I've got, because as it developed, I started having more and more complex ideas and more ideas that were getting further and further away from anything we'd ever done before. And that's on the one hand exciting because you're trying something new, but on the other hand it is also like kind of, this has never been tested before. This is a completely new space to exist in. And so I think that the point at which I felt the most worry perhaps was actually after it was done. During the actual process of all the recording and that, it was just, I was so in it in the moment, and all the mixing and that, and it was amazing, to be honest with you. But then after it's done, you've spent so long with something, and I'm sure a lot of musicians can relate to this, is you kind of go, you have this stupid moment where you go, what if it's all shit? You know, and everybody that's done anything creatively has that moment. So I'd say that the hardest part of the process was immediately after we'd finished the mixing of it. So.
Well, Bones and I had a few ideas before Raj joined the band, and we worked on that quite a lot. It must have been about 6 months before he joined, and then when he did join, it was kind of like a catalyst, and it all just kind of came together at once, and we'd written everything within about another 6 months, I think.
I think it was from the moment I joined the band. I've got a completely different playing style to Westy, and I think it allowed Bones and Phil to be a little bit more free with what it is they wanted to achieve.
Some of these songs stretch back a long way. Legend of the Five Sons nearly ended up on These Paths We Tread. That is a song that's been around since 2015. So, yeah, as much as you start writing songs for an album, I don't think it's ever as linear as you intend it to be. I think you have ideas in your head and things start to evolve, and I started to form some very strong ideas about the themes of the album, and then with that the songwriting evolves alongside that, and then like kind of the more I got kind of Phil and Raj involved, it was much more like kind of their ideas came in and I saw what they could do with it, and the whole thing like starts to really sort of kick off basically. And I think that the moment that we started to sort of really write together, the evolution process just started to snowball, you know. And then I'd say we continued writing right up to the pre-production, and even like some tweaking after the pre-production as well. So the evolution process, and I'd even say that there were some tweaks that we were doing to the parts in the studio itself. So maybe it never ever stops evolving until that point where that take is down and it is recorded.
All the songs were pretty much written well before we actually decided to like get into the studio, and then when we recorded pre-production, I mixed it all and everything, and I think it gave Ian a really good idea of the sort of sound we were going for, and just made the whole process a lot easier.
I think smooth process is an interesting way of putting it, because any creative process has its ups and downs. And I'd say that there are moments when we were in the rehearsal studio and we were like working on stuff, and some songs just came together instantly. It was like no effort at all. And there were other ones that we definitely had to work at aspects of them. And like, we're quite good, the three of us, at having quite a sort of good, what I call bullshit filter, of like kind of, we'll all chuck ideas in. Anybody can say anything about any part of the song. They don't like it, they do like it. I think we should try this instead, and we try all of the ideas, and for whatever reason we seem to be really good at going nah or actually that really works.
Well, because we were really focusing on our creativity, I think we just let ourselves go, and that's where it led.
Well, I mean, I actually came up with sort of the forest motif, so to speak, before I even started writing the lyrics for a lot of the songs and for a lot of the songwriting process, because I think I like to do that. I like to have a framework, like a kind of a world that this new record is going to live in. And like with the first record, it was all about historical disasters from a third person perspective, and then in These Paths We Tread, it was about like exploring mythic ideas with relation to like the human nature. And in this one, I had this idea of like making the songs a lot more about personal experiences that I directly experienced. But obviously I'm not just going to literally sing about things I've experienced, because it's a bit weird and that's not the kind of band we are. But I used archetypes within the sort of the idea of the sort of more pagan sort of forest motif, that kind of thing, and then use that as a vehicle for writing songs about things that had happened to me. Well, the song Death of All is about a specific experience I had on a certain psychotropic, and it was basically when I'd perhaps taken a little bit more than I should have at this particular point, and I was tripping, and I had what's called an ego death, and it's about, generally speaking, it's about when you lose a sense of self, your individuality disappears. So the person that I was, I couldn't identify that person anymore, and you feel a sense that you're instead of just being an individual, you are part of everything, the universe, and everything, all the beings in everything that's connected to it. And so although the song sounds like, you know, death of all, it's actually talking about the death of ego and the death of self, and it's more an exploration of when that does disappear, all the connections that come after it. So it's actually, although it sounds quite aggressive and all that, it's actually quite a sort of a spiritual song in a way. Like,
obviously it's Bones that sings it. He the place where the lyrics come from is losing your sense of self, right? So death of all, while sounds quite sinister, it more means that you're completely detached from everything around you. So you lose your sense of I. The obvious things that fueled the songs on the album were literally things that happened, like acts of betrayal in my life that I'd experienced. Sometimes not even recently. I actually delved back into some things that happened a long time ago in my life that personally I hadn't really addressed, and I felt like that I used this album much more as a cathartic process than I have any of my work up until this point, and I was able to exorcise some demons, as they say, and I think that is never an easy thing to do, but it's definitely a worthwhile thing to do. And what you do is you take that maybe negative energy that you've been storing away inside yourself, and you turn it into something else. You turn it into a song, and that transformation process of having something that's buried deep inside you, and then you literally letting it out in the terms of singing about it, playing music about it. It's almost like therapy. It's what it felt like for me. I was actually getting all this stuff out, and it means that when I listen back to the record, I connect with this record on a level that I haven't connected on the previous records. Not because I'm not proud of them, but this one is literally, that song starts and like, I know what that's about. That's about this particular thing that happened in my life. That's about this other particular thing that happened in my life. And in a way, I mean, that's why I'm so grateful to Phil and Raj, because there was a lot of personal stuff on this album, but they were willing to back me up and go along with it, even though it was like not necessarily things that directly happened to them. It was things that directly happened to me. And I guess that's why it's hard sometimes then when you, as you always do when you're in a band, when you get criticism, like whether it be press or whatever, but sometimes judge things on a surface level and never really think that
artistically maybe that person was trying to express something, and people can be pretty harsh in the press about things sometimes.
Well, I mean, we're all really good friends, and I think being able to empathise with each other is really, really important. And when Bones told us what the lyrics were and the singing and everything, it was being able to empathise with what he was saying that really fueled the way that I play the drums in certain parts of the songs.
There was definitely a change from the last album. We've upgraded a little bit. I now have an even bigger orange amp to go with all of our other orange amps that we have, and I think our sound is always evolving a little bit. I think the way we recorded it as well, I think Ian was very good at wanting to know how we sounded live and then trying to capture that, whereas I think on the previous album our sound, it was a bit difficult. Like at first we tried to record it, and then the last producer that we worked with, he decided to try and reproduce the big sound that we have live by layering lots of guitars over one another, and so the actual individual sounds of those guitars were less important. It was like about this whole wall of noise he was making, whereas Ian was like, no, I want to use as little tricks as possible, and there's something very real about the guitar sounds on the new album, but as a result of that you can't really hide. And so if you make mistakes, and he would always pick you up on mistakes and he was never about fixing it in the mix. He was like, no, you got to get it right now. And so as a result, there is a live, raw feel to this album that isn't on the previous album. The other album sounds much more produced than this one does. And I think that's not only a result of slightly new amps, but also the producer. His attitude was different.
So on the drums, we used pretty standard microphones that you'd expect, like an Audix D6 on the kick, but there were a few weird ones, a few condenser microphones, and then Ian did this really interesting thing where he put a microphone in the hallway as well. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff going on in the recording, which I won't bore you with.
Well, the fact that we've finished it and it's out there, and actually some people quite like it.
Just the whole thing as an album, it's just shown everything that we can do, and hopefully will open the door for what's to come.
I think the thing that I'm the most proud about is that it exists, that it's out there, that something that started as a crazy idea that my friends that I'm in a band with backed me up on, that there were times when we were like, is this too far? Have we gone too far? What have we done? That it's out there now and it exists and it's a real thing and it can never get taken back. It's now all these ideas that were crazy ideas, everything from recording the forest sounds to getting flute on it, to getting backing singers, to the forest motifs, to the artwork, even changing the artist that we used. The previous two records had used Dominic Sohor, amazing artist, but since getting Raj in the band, it felt like we were a new band now, and having to work with a new producer and then get a new artist, it all just made sense in a way. And so all those decisions we made for them to actually now, it worked. All those things we thought about, they worked, and it's just, as an artist, to finally get it out there and just to see people's reactions to it. And I've seen everything from people who love us anyway, who just love everything we do, going yeah, and then people I've seen people getting really emotional when they've listened to the record, and for me that means that, and there are people that perhaps didn't even necessarily know why they were getting emotional, but so it means that somehow there was something communicated on a subconscious level, and I just think that is just absolute gold as a songwriter.